So I think we'll get started. Welcome everyone. My name is Amber Stinger and I'm co-president along with Ellen Miller of the League of Women Voters of Johnson County. We are a nonpartisan grassroots organization created to engage and educate voters and to encourage active participation in our democracy. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. This meeting was supposed to take place in person on May 2nd. And despite all that's going on, we know that it's important that voters and our members understand what did and didn't happen in the Kansas legislative session this spring. So we are so grateful to Paul Johnson and Michael Poppa for their flexibility and willingness to join us on our first foray into virtual events. So many of you now are pretty expert at Zoom meetings, but some are still kind of figuring out their way on these new virtual platforms. So we wanted to go over a few suggestions to make this meeting more productive. First, Mitchell, sorry. Mitchell, sorry.
Yeah. All right, hold on.
Okay. Anyway, so here are some of our suggestions. First, we're recording this meeting and we'll post it later to our YouTube channel so others can watch it. And we're going to keep everyone muted, hopefully, to reduce the background noise. And we're going to use the chat box as the place where you can submit your questions, and we'll have a Q&A period at the end of our meeting. The chat log also will be saved and shared with the recording. So please keep that in mind. We ask that your comments be respectful and nonpartisan. So with that, I'd like to introduce Janet Milkovich. Janet recently retired from a leadership position with a nonprofit. And in addition to organizing tonight's event, she serves as a member of our Observer Corps and she monitors Overland Park City Council for us. So Janet, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Amber. I'm excited about what our speakers are going to share with us tonight. So let me introduce them and we'll get started. First up, we have Paul Johnson. Paul lives in rural Kansas, so his internet connection's a little bit unstable. So he's joining us by telephone. We really don't want you to miss a word of what he has to say. Paul is part of a co-op with 7 growers in northeastern Kansas. There he is, isn't he? There he is. He can't see us, but we can see him. He has had a challenge this spring between weather and then finding clients for his wonderful produce. A man of many talents, Paul is also a lobbyist with the Kansas Rural Center. He started lobbying so that he could monitor poverty programs and to be a voice for the less fortunate who are often underrepresented. And lastly, Paul is a consultant for the League of Women Voters on budget, tax, and election issues, and he provides weekly updates on Kansas legislative news. I've personally learned so much from Paul, and I know you will too. Hello, Paul.
Hello, Janet. Hello to all our participants tonight.
Really glad you're here. So next up, I'd like you to meet Michael Poppa, who is the new and very busy Executive Director of Mainstream Coalition, a political advocacy organization that often partners with the League on special events and important issues. Michael has served on the Overland Park City Council and with the Northeast Johnson County Chamber of Commerce. Because of the number of Facebook Live interviews he has hosted during the past few weeks, I bestowed on Michael a new title called Social Media Influencer of Johnson County. Are you blushing, Michael?
Oh, just laughing. I don't think anything could be further from the truth, but thank you.
You're welcome. I mean it though, I've learned a lot from you. And as a result of our shelter-in-place orders, Michael's 2 dogs have been very, very happy to have their daddy home. So welcome, Michael. We're so glad you're here. There you are.
Hi, thank you
So
so
now
much for having me.
you're welcome. I'm going to say it again now that I can see your face. Michael is the social media influencer of Johnson County.
That's
You
what
like
happened.
that?
Yeah.
Okay. So our goal this evening, we're going to cover 5 key points. We're going to talk about transparency in the House and Senate. We're going to talk about voter turnout, the budget, revenue, and tax battle, non-discrimination policy on a state and city level, and Medicaid expansion. And then we will answer as many of your questions as possible towards the end of this program. So Paul, are you ready to get us started?
You bet.
Okay, so Paul is going to speak to us about transparency, or the lack of, within the Kansas leadership in the House and Senate. For example, how do we know who will be chosen as legislative leaders and what rules will be put forward by the Rule Committee? And for that matter, what is the Rules Committee? So Paul, will you kind of hit the headlines on those questions?
Yeah, I'll do my best. You know,
Okay.
Obviously, June 1 is the filing deadline for the 125 House seats and the 40 state Senate seats in the legislature. So it's kind of a, you know, restarting the clock, I think, every election cycle. And it's a little amazing as you look over the years I've done this, how much turnover there is in the legislature and how many retirements there are and how much new people come into the legislature. You know, if I were guessing, I would say 2/3 of the 125 members of the House have not been there 6 years. So it's, you know, and we're going to see by June 1 how many seats are unchallenged and how many legislators, you know, mostly in the House, some in the Senate, that will not have any challengers. So we'll kind of get a lay of the land of that. Then we'll hit the August primary, and many of the races in Kansas, there are only challengers on the various sides, Republican or Democratic. And then we'll get to the November elections, and you know, then we'll know kind of what the balance of power is in the House and Senate, Republican versus Democrats. The first Monday in December is, by statute, is when legislative leaders are chosen by their various caucuses as who the speaker will be and the president of the Senate, and then other leaders under them. And then whoever's chosen speaker or president of the Senate then pretty much spends December deciding who are committee chairs of the important committees and where various members are put on various committees. So it's kind of a key time. Then we get to the start of the 2021 Kansas legislative session, and what happens at that point is that the House and Senate essentially adopt the existing House and Senate rules that are now in place, and then once that's done, they send it to a committee in the House and a committee in the Senate to see if there are changes that need to be made. And that is the time, probably, I think, when the League and other people want to see some changes about anonymous bills, about you know, how committees are run, and so and last thing I'll say is that, you know, everybody in Johnson County knows that Senator Denning has now retired, so we're going to have a new majority leader. Senator Wagle has been running for the U.S. Senate for several months. She has yet to file for the U.S. Senate seat, so we're going to see how that plays out. And the last thing I would say is that the present Speaker of the House is Ron Reichman. from Johnson County, and the normal play of, or the custom in the House has been that you serve 2 terms as a speaker and then you move on, and this is his 4th year, so he served those 2 terms, and we'll see, you know, first week of December whether Reichman would come back in these unprecedented times as a new speaker.
Thank you, Paul. So what we know for a fact is that one Senate leader has decided not to return. We assume that, presume that Senator Wiggle will not return. We don't know
Right.
about leadership of the House. So we can look at a big change in dynamics, I would think, in the legislature this coming session. So do you have some to influence leader selection? Is the League's 411 Vote 411 survey going to help with that?
That would be a starting point, you know. I meant, obviously there are key questions here about, you know, how open should these House and Senate rules be, and how, you know, the committee chairpersons that are appointed right now by the leadership have, you know, almost unilateral power to control committees, and there's real questions about how fair that process is, and
Right.
you know, there are a lot of people who are asking fundamental questions about, we need to open up this process.
Right.
Right.
So the Kansas League has been lobbying to disallow anonymous bill sponsors and off-the-record voting. Have we
Right.
made much progress with our efforts?
There's been a bit of progress in terms of anonymous bills. It gets into a question of whether, you know, some bills, as you look at them, and last year the House had 750 of them and the Senate had 500 some. You know, individual senators or representatives that ask for a bill, then their name's put on it. Many times they go to through the committee and they ask for the committee to introduce it as a committee bill. Then the question is there a record in the minutes of that time so that you can track which representative or senator specifically asked for the introduction? And we really need to open that up better.
Right. I totally agree, because as we're trying to all be advocates for a better, better Kansas, and we're trying to determine who we want to vote for, if we don't know how they voted on issues, it really is a disadvantage for us. Would you agree?
Well, you know, it's still a debate about, I mean, when you take final action on the House floor or the Senate floor, then you're a recorded vote.
Okay.
Right now, in the committee process, the way the rules are set is that there are not recorded votes per se. The only thing the House and Senate rules say is if I, as a House member of a committee, want to be recorded, I can request that, and then that goes into the minutes.
Okay, gotcha.
And, you know, a lot of people are debating, you know, why don't we have, you know, more final, why don't we have people saying, I voted this bill to get out of committee?
Right, that goes back to transparency. Well, thank you, Paul. As always, you're really helpful. I appreciate it. And we're going to transition over to Michael. Michael, and along these same lines, since all the House and Senate seats are on the ballot, there's so much riding on the November election. I've heard it said, and you've agreed, that less voter turnout means fewer needs met. Can you speak to that, Michael, and the importance of voter turnout, and tell us a little bit about Mainstream's voter-to-voter initiative?
So simply put, democracy is strongest when we all participate, but only about 50% of eligible voters actually vote. And they're disproportionately older, whiter, and wealthier than the population as a whole. If governing bodies aren't representative of their communities they serve, then the voices are left unheard. And as you mentioned, this is a very important election year. In addition to the presidential and the US and House races, as you mentioned, all 165 voting members of the Kansas legislature are up for re-election. And the legislators that we elect this November are going to be responsible for drawing the state and congressional legislative districts. And the way districts are drawn has a major impact on representation.
Right.
You know, it can influence elections, how power is distributed, which communities are represented, and ultimately, you know, what laws are passed.
Right.
And you asked about voter to voter. Oh,
Yes.
sorry.
No, that's right. How does voter to voter address that?
Well, voter to voter is a new Get Out the Vote project in Kansas under our Education Foundation. And we work to increase voter turnout. It's led by our Director of Voter Engagement, Lindsay Begum, who the League honored with the Making Democracy Work Award in 2019.
Right.
Yeah, and we're very proud of Lindsay and all the work that she's accomplished. And thank you for honoring her that way.
Well, I know for a fact that voter to voter has helped me reach out to my network and encourage them. I send them emails and text about issues, about opportunities, a change in voter sites. But tell me a little bit, how is the voter to voter funded and why?
So voter to voter is funded primarily through grants from education foundations. Our current funders are the Gould Charitable Foundation, Health Forward, Kansas Health Foundation, REACH, and United Methodist Health Ministry Fund. Because they found that health outcomes are heavily influenced by programs and policies that are put in place at the local, state, and federal levels. So Kansas communities that experience the poorest health outcomes are less likely to be civically engaged. Or you could flip that. And you could say the communities that experience the most positive health outcomes are more likely to be civically engaged, and that includes voting.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, what voting populations does mainstream specifically focus on?
So we focus on engaging low propensity voters or those underrepresented in the political process. And among those voters are persons of color, rural communities, LGBTQ individuals, youth, and those with lower socioeconomic status. Okay.
And do you have any stats on how it's worked with those populations?
Yes, it's working.
Yes.
We love it. In 2018, in the 2018 election, voter to voter turned out 82% of voters connected to the tool compared to 57% statewide.
That's pretty incredible, isn't it?
And then 2019 locals, we saw more than twice the turnout. And we're looking forward to even more this year.
And I know that you have come to some of our league meetings and trained people to be a part of voter to voter, and I hope we get to do that again. And as everybody here knows, the league puts so much emphasis on getting out the vote and voter registrations. We go to colleges, we go to nursing homes, we go all over and try to get people to register and exercise that wonderful power. So another question for you, there's been such a huge development in voting rights in Kansas. Let's talk about one of the latest, which is proof of citizenship for voter registration. So what efforts took place at the state level around voting rights this session?
So I think you're mentioning the documentary proof of citizenship, which is the law that Popa pushed requiring proof of citizenship to register to vote. And you would need a passport, birth certificate, or proof of naturalization, which not everyone can obtain very easily, if at all. It disenfranchised 30,000 would-be voters or voters that would otherwise be eligible from 2013 to 2016. So we're very happy that the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals upheld the lower court and saying it was unconstitutional.
Oh.
So what's been going on? What's been done at the state level? Well, Mainstream and the League, as you know, are both members of the Kansas Coalition for Citizen Participation. And we advocate for equitable, accessible registration and voting for all Kansans. We do this by working with state officials, holding lobby days, and other coordinated call to action events. This year in the State House, Representative Parker, he sponsored a bill that would allow provisional voting if a voter moves across one county line and didn't re-register. And it would also enact same-day voter registration at the polls. Unfortunately, though, it didn't make it out of committee. But
so what's next?
Yeah, unfortunately. But, you know, the KCCP and all the organizations, we're continuing to advocate for voting rights and access, especially now because of COVID-19.
Right. That leads me to my next question. COVID-19 has wreaked havoc on the election process in Wisconsin that we could see. What can we in Kansas do to head off those problems?
Well, it would be great if we made it easier to register, but I don't think that's going to happen this year. And until it does at the state level, we push everyone to ksvotes.org. I know a lot of organizations do. You can register and request primary and general advance ballots at the same time, right from your phone or your computer. I requested mine for the first time through KS Votes, and it was super easy.
And that was for your mail-in ballot?
Yeah, that was for the mail-in, the mail ballot, so the advance ballot.
Yeah.
We can expand access to advance ballots. It's another thing that we can do. You know, Johnson County, I believe Wyandotte County and Shawnee counties, they're mailing advance ballots out to, or at least applications, out to all active registered voters, and this should be a statewide practice. We should enact permanent mail ballot status for all eligible voters and not just those with qualifying disabilities, and create some sort of statewide online tracking and notice system of rejection for mail ballots, so that there's a chance to remedy those. And I'd really like to see a rollout of a statewide public education campaign. You know, something that talks about advanced voting options for people. And of course, we're going to have some in-person polling locations. We need them in all jurisdictions for those who aren't able to do mail ballot or for whatever reason. We need to keep those places clean. Mm-hmm. We need to have PPE and safe distancing available, and just make sure that any changes in those polling locations don't disproportionately affect underrepresented populations.
That's become a real hotbed issue around the country, from state to state. Some people are already doing mail-in ballots. Others are saying we'll never get a fair election. So I know the League's going to continue to work on this, and Mainstream is going to continue to work on that. So what do we ask our members now? What do we ask them to write their representatives and say we're in support of this, or what's the best thing?
I always urge people to write your legislators, write your representatives, let them know what you need, how you feel, even if it's thanking, and especially if it's thanking them for where they go, because I'm sure they get a lot more negative feedback than they do positive.
Right, great. Well, thank you.
Push everyone to ksvotes.org so they can register safely or request their advance ballots safely in their home.
Right, and you can, if you've moved recently, you could easily change your address and update that on ks.org, right? Kansas.org.
Yep, yes. You can update your registration as well.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Michael. We're going to switch back over to Paul now. And Paul, you with us?
Yeah, I'm still with you. Yes, I am.
Okay, thank you. Well, we appreciate your willingness to talk about a really unpopular subject, which is taxes and the budget. Thanks for taking one for the team, Paul. So the governor is the point person to develop a plan of recovery following the pandemic. What's happened and what's going to happen to the Kansas budget as a result of COVID-19?
Well, the simple answer is nobody wrote a playbook for this type, a pandemic of this magnitude or the economic collapse that's coming with it. So right now where we sit is that before the legislature left on March 19th, they passed a state budget, which is their one mandatory responsibility that they have to do. So, they don't really have to do anything in this wrap-up or veto session, but that's one thing they did get done. And the governor didn't veto any particular items with it. And then we got the new revenue estimates from the Consensus Revenue Estimating Group in Topeka on the 20th of April. And suddenly our $900 million ending balance for this fiscal year, which ends June 30th, which is fiscal year 2020. I know it's a little confusing here. And then fiscal year 2021 starts July 1 and goes to June 30th, 2021. So we had a $900-some million ending balance when that budget was signed, and now with the decline, it's about 200 million at this point. So, and what that means is that there's enough in the bank for the governor to get us through without immediate budget cuts for through the end of June this year. Okay. And then we get to 2021, and right now the ending balance is a deficit of about $658 million. And so now the question is, how do we handle that? Right. I don't think the legislature is going to be back for a one-day session, May 21, to end off the session. I don't think that the legislature is going to step in and say, Governor, we want you to cut this, this, and this, so we can start, putting the budget back into balance. I think they're going to leave it to the governor. The governor has broad authority to handle budget cuts over the next year, but so I think she's going to be on her own to kind of figure this out. Legislature comes back, whoever it is, next January, and then they'll probably review what steps she's taken, and then we'll make a I would end this by saying that the uncertainty here is how much federal funding is going to come to Kansas that can be used to backfill some of these revenue cuts or revenue decline. And that's still, the first $2 trillion CARES Act, whatever it's called, that Congress passed was pretty explicit, saying you could use the money for COVID needs and COVID expenses, but you couldn't use it to backfill revenue declines. Right. Question is, are they going to review that in some fashion, or are we going to see a fourth or fifth package from the federal government to specifically help out the state of Kansas?
Okay. I have so many questions. Don't have time to get to them all, but we read today that the governor has authority to extend the emergency order for 12 days. Do I have that accurately?
She has the State Finance Council, which we could talk about, ruled that she had asked to go till June 13th. Right. For her emergency power to keep certain businesses and non-essential enterprises closed down, and they cut that back 3 weeks to May 26th. Okay. Okay, so here's another question. It's really a three-part question. We'll try to answer it in 3 minutes, see if we can do this. But do you think our legislators are going to show up on May 21st? Or will they're concerned for their own health, keep some at home? I think that's an open question. I'm not sure that everybody really knows. I mean, there's nothing that absolutely has to pass in a one-day session, and by excuse me, by constitutional law, the legislature has to meet in Topeka. So you can't do this virtually by Zoom or whatever.
Right.
So that's where we sit now. And the Senate, is spaced enough with 40 members in the chamber, et cetera, that works. The House is more problematic with 125 members, and people, are going, if they want to space 6 or 8 feet apart, you're going to put people up in the galleries and whatever. So I think it's an open question how many are going to show up.
And is a quorum required for anything that needs to be done on the 21st?
Yes, it would be.
Okay.
And so that'd be 63 in the House and 21 in the Senate.
Okay.
The other caveat I would throw in on that is that, we'll see if they pass anything. And a couple items that they might pass is they might give some recommendations to the governor how to spend any new federal funds.
Right.
And they might also step in with a bill to redo the emergency order authority that the governor now has. Any bill that would pass in that one day, the governor still has her veto authority. And there's no provision for, since the session's over at that point, they couldn't override if she vetoes something she didn't like.
Okay, thank you. So we're bound to know it's a week from today when everybody gets together, and I know that the League will keep people up to date, and Mainstream Coalition does a great job of giving you late breaking news, and you'll keep us all informed too. So thank you so much, Paul.
You bet.
Michael, I'm coming back to you. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, so another important topic to discuss with you, the League of Johnson County set a priority to build a foundation for embedding diversity, equity, and inclusion in our culture. I know this is something that you personally have championed, at least since you were on the city council, if not before that. This year, we saw a large number of cities in Johnson County adopt non-discrimination ordinances. But can you explain what those are, and can you give us a little history of NDOs in our county?
Sure, it'd be my pleasure. So as far as the state's concerned, first of all, it is legal to discriminate on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity and expression. So non-discrimination legislation at the state level, though, would put a stop to that simply by adding or amending the KAAD to include such provisions. But since the states failed to do this, some cities and counties have passed their own non-discrimination ordinances that expressly outlaw this type of discrimination in employment, housing, and public accommodation. And that's what spurred 2 members of the Roland Park governing body to contact Equality Kansas in 2013. At that time, I served on the executive committee of Equality Kansas, and I was a Roland Park resident, so naturally I was interested in discussing. And in March of 2014, we presented our case to the Roland Park City Council. And to make a very long story short, it turned into a very contentious 5-month battle over basic civil rights. Finally, on July 21st, the council voted, and it failed by 1 vote. And we were heartbroken, all of us, Equality Kansas, Mainstream, ACLU, and an overwhelming number of community supporters and advocates who were there with us from the beginning. So we took a couple of days to grieve, and then we got back to work. And on August 4th, we reintroduced an NDO. It was discussed, and it was passed the same night with the mayor breaking the tie. And Roland Park being the first city in Johnson County to protect the LGBTQ community from discrimination. Very proud of that.
And you should be in all of your work. When this came up for vote in Overland Park at the city council, one of the city council members voted against it because he said they had no authority to enforce it. So, and he had said that it needs to be enforced on a state level. So that's my next question. What has been done at the state level? And didn't Governor Kelly do something to protect the LGBTQ workers?
Yes. So what's been done on the state level from a legislative standpoint is nothing. So it's still legal to discriminate, as I said, on the basis of sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression in about 97% of the state. And so that's why it's so important to have state level protections. With the non-discrimination ordinances that were passed last year in Johnson County, that brought the total number of non-discrimination ordinances at the municipal level to only 17 in Kansas.
Wow.
Wow. But on her first day in office, her first full day, her first order of business, Governor Kelly's, was to sign an order that reinstated protections for LGBTQ workers in state agencies. And those were first put in place by Sebelius in 2007, and then Brownback subsequently rescinded them in, I think, 2015. And while her reinstatement is encouraging and very grateful that she did it, it's only limited, or it is limited to the executive branch agencies under her control. So again, state level protections are very necessary.
I know that. Well, who in our legislature is working on this at a state level? Are there any people that are carrying the water for this?
Yes, definitely. Now, someone has sponsored a bill, or at least legislation has been introduced, I believe, in the Kansas, at the Capitol since 2005. Every year since about 2005, legislation has been proposed. Since Representative Brandon Woodard and Susan Reese were elected, they've taken the torch, as you said. So they've taken the lead on progressing the non-discrimination legislation, and they are working with Equality Kansas and Mainstream and other statewide organizations. This year they co-sponsored a bill with many other sponsors, and it actually got a hearing. But then I was set to testify, a bunch of other people were set to testify, and it was the day before the Capitol closed. And
wow.
So that's where it stands right now. I'm sure it will be introduced again next year.
So the earliest you can even expect the conversation to start would be January.
Correct.
Wow, I'm sorry. That's disappointing all the way around. But so what can we as members of the league do with this election coming up? How do we convey a message to people running for office, or how do we find out what positions our candidates take on this?
Sure. Well, I think first what the league members can do, and what they already do, in my opinion, is lead by example. So vote. We need to get the right people in office who work for all Kansans and don't play partisan politics. And then we can all do more than vote. So we need to register, to educate, to participate, and to engage low propensity voters. Make sure the people that are regular voters like us, make sure they vote, but also use personal relationships to make sure that we can get out the vote with low propensity or disenfranchised voters. On mainstream side, you can use KS Ledge Lookup. I believe it's similar to Vote 411.
Okay.
You can please join the league's team on Voter to Voter. And there's a ballot guide out there. We put out a ballot guide under the foundation, and it's ksballot.org. And there you can find everything that's on your ballot, every issue that's going to be on your ballot, and all the information on the candidates. On the mainstream side, you can look up ksledgelookup.org, and you can see the mainstream score. And I believe mainstream and the league align on very many issues. So you can see how your incumbents have voted.
Okay, thank you. I think one question that's been posed that sometimes we just don't have the language to ask the right question, or we don't know how to pose that question to people running for office. And probably since most of the campaigning is going to be by Zoom and other ways, maybe we'll have be a little more courageous about asking. So everything that you're doing, we really appreciate. Thank you.
Thank you. Same to you.
You're brave. And now for our last topic. Paul, we're coming back to you. You with us? Paul? Are you muted?
Paul, you should, I muted you, but I just unmuted you, so you should.
Okay, that's
Okay.
good.
I knew you didn't duck out on us, Paul. I knew you didn't. So we're coming back to you with a question about Medicaid expansion. And many of us, probably everybody on the call practically, had hoped that Medicaid expansion would be giving another shot at life at the veto session. But now, since the legislature will convene for just one day, a week from now, it seems unlikely that anything will progress. Have you heard anything on the scuttlebutt that you can share with us about that?
Well,
scuttlebutt is a real political word.
Well, if we had a change of heart on some of the political leadership in Kansas, then something could be done. And there are bills that that the House passed that went to the Senate, but it didn't have all the revisions of Medicaid expansion that Senator Denning and Governor Kelly worked out, and that bill never got out of Senate Public Health and Welfare's committee. So, and the governor said pretty directly that, she wasn't holding her breath that any vote on Medicaid expansion would happen in the veto session. So, I mean, it's not totally out of the question that something could be put together, but it's a very slim chance.
Okay, so what can the league members, I keep asking the same question, I know, but what can we do?
Well, I think it's a question of all the candidates that, want to go to the House and Senate, for 2021 to ask them if they, support Medicaid expansion. I think Kansas is, we're down to what, 14 or 15 states in the country that haven't done it. Our rural hospitals, and even some of the urban hospitals and center cities are, in pretty desperate financial stakes.
Right.
And I mean, it just, involves 130, 150,000 Kansans that are uninsured at this point. And I think the whole debate about, as we watched 35 million people file for unemployment, and we build a health care system on essentially employer-supplied health insurance coverage. I mean, I think we have to really reevaluate it.
Okay. So you said how many people need insurance?
Well, the estimates are that if we expanded Medicaid in Kansas, it would pick up 130 to 150,000 uninsured Kansans.
So is that like 2 or 3 football fields? If we filled the Kansas Chief football field up and fill it up 2 or 3 times?
Help me with that question once more.
So I was trying to get some kind of a visual. I think probably the Kansas City Chiefs Stadium holds around 60,000 people, right? So we could fill that
I think
stadium up almost.
Actually, I think 80,000 is what
Okay.
Chief said. So
Okay.
it'd be twice that, but
Yeah.
we're covering
That's,
about 400. We're covering about 400,000 Kansans with Medicaid today,
Okay.
and it and even if you pick those up, there would still be, I think, I don't know, 7 to 10% Kansans that would still be uninsured, but
Okay.
it would be vital for those people.
Okay. I know we've seen during this pandemic that people require medical care, and I always wonder if somebody's in the hospital for 3 weeks, how in the world
Right.
they're ever going to pay for it. So to be determined, but this is something we need to keep in mind as we're going to the polls, right? Testing
Yeah, I think
our
it
balance.
should be. I think it should be a critical part of the questions that the league asks, you know, in their 411 vote, you know,
Okay.
efforts to.
Okay.
And I think, you know, I'm hoping that there'll be a change of heart when we get to the next legislature.
Yes, we can all hope that.
Mm-hmm.
So Paul, thank you. Now we've got about 10 minutes left. Do we have some questions, Mitchell, that have been submitted to answer?
Yeah, I'm gonna send them to you. Hold on a second.
Okay, all right. And then Michael and Paul, you payback is okay. If you have questions for us, you can ask them. And I'll defer to Amber.
I've been taking notes.
Oh, you have? Oh boy. Now I'm really scared.
I was going to say on the efforts by county election officers in terms of sending out notices for people to get absentee ballots, that I live in a rural county between Lawrence and Topeka, and I just got mine in the mail. And I know that all the major urban counties in Riley and some of the others have, and even Lyon County, which is Emporia. So, you know, regardless of whether Scott Schwab, as our Secretary of State, takes any leadership on this, or, you know, tries to focus this debate, I think a number of counties are seeing the writing on the wall for what a treacherous, especially August primary could be with this pandemic.
We have a question from Marge that was asking, do all counties accept mail-in ballot applications that are submitted through ksvotes.org?
Yes.
That was Michael. The answer is yes. So all counties.
Yes.
Great. Thank you.
We have.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Paul.
The thing I was going to say is that, you know, one good thing about Kansas law is that you don't have to have a reason for why you want an absentee vote. That, you know, other states have, you know, you have to co-sign, or you have to, you know, have a death certificate, you know, doctor's permit or whatever. It's a much more open process in Kansas.
Okay. Well, Claire asked a question in reference to that. How can we counter the idea that voting by mail isn't secure, or that it could jeopardize the integrity of the election? Michael or Paul, got the answer? Michael, go.
I think it's proof of concept. Really, it's going to be hard to counter every single idea, right, that someone has, or every single misinformation piece that's put out there. But we can prove our concept that mail ballots work here in Kansas this election. And that's why we really need to get people out to vote by mail. But I think it's also putting into place some safeguards with that as well.
Right.
I mentioned earlier a statewide system, a notice system for rejections, and a way to remedy that. I know in my race, I won by 4 votes in the end. And I was out the day of the election pulling people out of their houses because I called the election. And I did. I called the election, and 15 people that mailed in ballots their vote wasn't counted. They didn't have them for one reason or another. The signature was wrong or this or that. So I was pulling people out of the house and saying, "Need you to go vote provisionally. Need you to go vote provisionally." So yeah, I think the safeguards need to be there though. Now that's not, I don't know how widespread that is, and I'm really hoping it's not. But a way to get online or to call and see if your advance ballot's been received. And then if it's rejected, a way that you can cast your vote so that your vote is still counted.
And you used a dirty word, provisional ballots.
Right.
We had so much trouble with that in the last election. So that's a slippery slope, isn't it?
It is. It's a slippery slope. But it's also, you know, if they wouldn't have gone out, at least my people, if they wouldn't have gone out and voted provisionally, then I would not have won my seat. I actually won by 5 votes the night of the election. The unofficial results were 5. After the final canvass, it was 4. So they did.
Would you explain just real quickly what a provisional vote is?
Sure. So it's a vote. So if you go into the, it's into the polling location, and let's say you might be in the wrong polling location, or you requested an advanced ballot, you requested a mail ballot, and you don't remember if you sent it in or not, right? Well, they will still let you vote. You can vote on election day in a polling location if you're eligible to vote, you're a registered voter, because we don't have same-day registration right now. No matter what, you can cast a provisional ballot.
Okay.
So you are allowed to do that. And then the Elections Commission will then go through, I mentioned the final canvass, it's about a week later. They go through all of the ballots and they check off. And so let's say I mailed my ballot in. I forgot. I went to the polling location. I voted. My vote was provisional. They got my mail ballot and it counted, so my provisional ballot was thrown out.
It's tossed. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We have a question from Amber Sellers. What would be the purpose of the legislature trying to limit the governor's authority during an emergency declaration? Sorry, I can't see the rest of the question in there. Paul's got that one.
I'm not sure there's an easy answer to that. You know, I think the legislature, when they come back on their one-day wrap-up session, are going to try and pass something to to state what they think the governor's emergency authority is. If the governor has any problems with it, she's going to veto it. And I'm not a scholar or an attorney, but I think the question really gets down to, the governor's mandate to protect public health.
Yeah.
In the state of Kansas, and I think scholars and folks are going to have to clarify that in the future. But I'd be surprised that she doesn't have a broader authority to protect public health.
Okay, thank you. Anything to add to that, Michael?
No, I think Paul hit it on the head. I also think it's they would want to limit because politics, because it's an election season, and they're playing to their bases. Right.
So our last question before Amber wraps us up would be from Kathleen asked, are there any legislators, either incumbents or people running for office, that are going to be champions for same-day registration? Well,
Representative Brett Parker did sponsor a bill this year that included provisions for same-day registration. So, and I spoke with him, and he will continue to champion that and carry it forward. And there have been other legislators in the Northeast in Johnson County, I should say, that have said the same thing.
Did it make it out of committee?
The legislation that he proposed or that he sponsored this year did not make it out of committee, but he will reintroduce it again next year.
Okay, so that's something we all need to pay attention to.
Yes, or it will be reintroduced again next year, I should say.
Okay, thank you. Well, what a wonderful evening it has been. Michael and Paul, you've done us proud. I thank you so much. And now I'd like to turn this back over to our co-president, Amber.
Great, thank you, Janet. Before we close, I just want to thank Janet again for putting all of this together tonight, and thank Paul and Michael for sharing their time and expertise. In the next few days, we'll be posting the recording to YouTube, so please share that with your friends and family. And we'll also be sending a short survey to you by email to get your feedback so we can improve on our next online event. So thank you all for